You were all over the media recently for criticizing females with big eyelashes.
Listen, I know white women wear them. I know Hispanic women wear them. But if we being honest, who's the franchise? This shit looks ridiculous. No man has ever said, yo, you know what would make her look hotter? Pterodactyl wings on the face.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, the star of our show, direct from the bar,
PB.
What is going on out there, Pete? Hey, let's do a side-by-side comparison between Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnam Dong. And let's figure out which one is the right investment, shall we? Alrighty, the foreign exchange market is attractive and volatile in response to changes in economic policy, political stability, and world trade. As for the less known currencies, the IQD, the foreign exchange market is attractive and volatile in response to changes in economic policies, political stability, and world trade. As for the less known currencies, the Iraqi Dinar, IQD, and the Vietnam Dong, the VND, seem to be rather interesting for investors and enthusiasts in general. The two currencies have a history of their own and go through different economic indicators. This article gives a detailed understanding of them and comprehensive overview of their present position with a focus on their past and prospects of investment. Now again, these articles that come out, they give you the good, the bad, and the ugly, which is what you want to hear. We don't need the historical background of either currency, to be honest with you. If by now you should know the history of them. Although we'll read this part for each of the currency. After 2003, the Central Bank of Iraq put into circulation newly designed dinar notes with increased security to foster economic stability. This, however, is an illusion, and as such, the currency continues to be undervalued due to political instability and dependence on oil exports, which are your two remaining biggest problems. As for Vietnam, Vietnam has been transforming gradually from a centrally planned economy, which was a market-oriented economy. This has made the dong more stable. Vietnam is presently well recognized for its strong industrial base and growing export-oriented economy, which has played a part in the favor of the dong. So the dong does have a lot of things going for it and doesn't have nowhere near as many hurdles as Iraq has to go through. Economic drivers, Iraq's economy. Having over 90% of the government's income from oil, the economy of Iraq highly centralized. However, this makes the dinar dominated by global oil prices. Unimaginable reserves in Iraq point to their fairly huge economic prospects. So we know that Iraq definitely has a lot of prospects if they could just keep themselves out of trouble. Nevertheless, the political instability, corruption, and poor transport infrastructure have remained a push factor for the diversification of the economy. The post-conflict rebuilding of the country has been shabby, which has exacerbated investors' skepticism of the dinar exchange rate. That's why I keep telling people all the time, you guys keep saying, well, look how much oil they have. There's more involved in determining the value of a currency. That's why I tell you guys, come here. The information's free. You don't have to pay to be in somebody's Zoom or Patreon. You can come here and I actually do videos that you'll get educated from. You might not like the news, but I'm going to give it to you good, bad, or the ugly, okay? Vietnam's economy. Vietnam's economy is not solely dependent on exports, but rather developed in manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. It exports many goods, such as textile products, electronic products, and agricultural products. However, compared to Iraq, Vietnam has had fairly political stability, which has encouraged the flow of free capital investments. Vietnam has adopted a free market economy as a central policy since Doi Moi. Economic reforms were introduced in the middle of the late 1980s. This has helped to ensure that the dong continues to appreciate, although it has a low level of inflation. Current exchange rates. The IQD, the current exchange rate from US dollars to 1,317 IQD. In other words, for every $1 US, you get 1,317 Iraqi dinars. Its stability in the recent past has been, for the most part, driven by the Central Bank of Iraq's interventions. The The following interventions, such as maintaining large foreign currency reserves and conducting monetary policy measures, have reduced the sharp up and down fluctuations. Nevertheless, as it depends on the stability of the oil income and the governmental efficiency in managing economic risks, the dinar is fairly vulnerable. The Vietnam dong. According to the current exchange rate, the Vietnam dong is equivalent to, you can get 25,318 Vietnam dong for $1. As mentioned earlier, it has a significantly lower face value as compared to the Iraqi dinar. The dong has gradually appreciated against most currencies due to growth in Vietnam's economy. Such growth is supported by the expanding export market, increased foreign domestic investment, and sound trade liberalization. The managed float policy of the State Bank of Vietnam does not deviate too far from the policy, which makes the currency respond to other macroeconomic factors. So the dong is a more stable currency in which to invest. That's what I was saying. The Vietnam dong doesn't have anywhere near the amount of hurdles that Iraqi dinar does. Investing in Iraqi dinar, due to efforts to restore its foreign exchange reserves, the Iraqi dinar has become a hotcake for speculative investors, especially those waiting for its revaluation. Some analysts and politicians think the improvements are obtainable because Iraq's oil reserves and possible economic liberalization. However, investing in the dinar carries substantial risk. Volatility. Due to the volatile security and political situation in Iraq, this currency is one of the most volatile around the globe. Over the past 3 decades, Iraq has experienced conflict, international embargo, and internal violence, which all affect the unit value of its currency. See, this is what I'm talking about. When all you people keep saying, oh, they got all this oil. I keep telling you, man, there's more to it than that. They got to stay out of conflict. They have to get out of embargoes. They have to stop the political infighting. There's a lot of things involved when you're trying to figure out the exchange rate. A stable political and economic situation in any country is a definite positive thing because investors are therefore protected from sharp value devaluations of the currency. However, the dinar is not stable, and its value can be highly unpredictable and vulnerable, which is not good news for anyone trying to make a consistent profit from foreign exchange, especially when they have invested in the dinar. Limited convertibility. The Iraqi dinar cannot be purchased by foreign clients in the global foreign exchange market thanks to its extremely low availability. None of the dealers, in most cases, is willing to provide direct quotations for dinars, and most of the time investors have to search for specialized dealers who deal in such and engage in private transactions to buy and sell dinars. This fact makes it less accessible to investors and brings issues of fraud and overly high premiums into the picture. A certain revaluation prospects. So one of the main reasons investors may cite for investing in the Iraqi dinar is the possibility of its revaluation. Still seems more or less remote. The restoration of the value would need significant economic changes, stability, and a rich economy, which are the country's future objectives. When and to what degree all of this might happen is unclear, which only brings the idea of investing in the Iraqi dinar as more closely aligned with speculation than a wise investment plan. Investing in the Vietnam dong. The Vietnam dong is often viewed as a safer investment compared to the Iraqi dinar. Vietnam's stable political environment and growing economy provide a more predictable outlook investors are drawn to. Economic growth. Vietnam's GDP is continuing to grow much higher than many emerging markets. In the last decade, industrial development, the export sector, and gradually growing domestic demand has sustained a high growth path for the country. Here, the economic forces has played a key role in improving investors' confidence and for dong's gradual appreciation. Trade partnership. Free trade agreements that the country is involved in improve its economy. Vietnam has acceded to numerous trade agreements. Current free trade agreements are the Trans-Pacific Partnership, revamped as the CPTPP, and the RCEP. These effect enhance Vietnam's export capabilities, export capacity, fortifying its manufacturing sector, and giving the country's FDI, all of which are beneficial to the dong. Currency stability. Slowly and steadily, rising dong indicators indicates the fact that underlying economic conditions in Vietnam are strengthening. This actual flow of policy of the State Bank of Vietnam has been quite useful in performing this dual role of controlling the stability of the currency and at the same time responding to the fluctuations in the market. It slower unequal fluctuations and helps Dong maintain adequate synchronization with the country's high economic growth. Nevertheless, treats the inflation and dependence on exports are dangerous facing the Dong and may affect its value. Currency market dynamics. Global perception. Hopes and expectations of people of the whole world affect the valuation of the IQD and the Vietnam Dong. The dinar is also associated with Iraq's struggling political environment that repels most conventional investors. On the other hand, Vietnam's image as a bargaining manufacturing power helps the Dong. Government policies. The Central Bank of Iraq, has used certain techniques to control the dinar, such as controlling inflation and maintaining foreign currency reserves. However, he added, the underlying reforms in the economic landscape are still necessary to support investors' confidence. Vietnam. The Dong uses the practices of managed floating exchange rate since the State Bank of Vietnam is in charge of the currency. The government is actively encouraging investment from overseas, and similar policies will continue to augur well for the Dong's future. So here are your key takeaways. Similarities. Emerging market currencies. The IQD is the currency of a country that is considered an emerging market, and so is the Vietnam Dong. Iraq and Vietnam are considered countries with emergent economies that are predominantly dependent on certain types of industries, the main in which Iraq could be considered an oil industry, while Vietnam, it could be manufacturing and agriculture. At some point, we find that the currencies are a reflection of the economic uncertainties and future opportunities in these markets. Managed exchange rate policies. Unlike most other currencies that are floated in the foreign exchange market, both currencies are manipulated by respective central banks. The Central Bank of Iraq affects the IQD's exchange rate to stabilize the economy. The State Bank of Vietnam manipulates the Vietnam Dong's value to fund local exports and also curb the inflation rate. Low minimal values. Both currencies are characterized by low nominal values against major global currencies like the US dollar. For example, the exchange rate of the Vietnam Dong is in the thousands and tens of thousands per US dollar, while the IQD, though not as extreme, also trade in a low nominal value compared to stronger currencies. Currency devaluing history. The IQD has been gradually devaluing in the past, while the Vietnam Dong has also been devalued at one point or another. After the Gulf War in the early 1990s and the ensuing sanctions, the value of the IQD went down considerably. Likewise, similar inflation and devaluation were realized in Vietnam Dong during the early 1990s and the liberalization of the Vietnamese economy. They have determined their present exchange rate systems and the market impression regarding them. Differences. Economic foundation. The Iraqi Dinar has a significant connection with Iraq, in which is over 90% dependent on oil sales. As for Vietnam Dong, the economy behind it has been more diversified, with manufacturing, agriculture sectors, as well as technology exports. Vietnam's economy is more diversified than that of Iraq, which greatly depends on a specific sector. Global trade integration. Vietnam is heavily connected with the international market, mainly through exports. Since it has a VND as its official currency, it exports electronics, garments, and agriculture products. Through participation in different FTAs, the Vietnam Dong has an advantage. Iraq, on the other hand, mostly export petroleum, and IQD is much less used in the international foreign exchange market outside of petroleum business. Inflation and currency value trends. Vietnam's currency, the VND, has steadily been devalued over the years as the country looks for ways to compete in export markets. See what it says here? It says it's been devalued just to find ways to compete. So they're devaluing their currency so that they have cheaper export. Same thing that China does. On the other hand, the IQD has undergone revaluation and it is comparatively more stable because Iraq strives to support a fixed exchange rate, mainly because of impact on oil prices. This makes it less volatile compared to the Vietnam Dong, whose rate of exchange is far more often due to market forces. Monetary policy framework. The Central Bank of Iraq and the State Bank of Vietnam work on different structural plans for monetary policies. The Central Bank of Iraq's policies are primarily dictated by post-conflict stability and control over the oil revenues. The State Bank of Vietnam, on the other hand, is concerned with exporting competitiveness and controlling inflation within a fast-growing economy, often utilizing instruments such as interest rates and foreign exchange reserves. This has been evident in the way each country has set its monetary policy to suit the economic problems that prevail in each country. Conclusion. The periods under consideration present two quite different stories in the global currency market, the Iraqi Dinar and the Vietnamese Dong. Ways forward for the dinar greatly depend on the stability of its political situation and the development of a more diverse economy for Iraq. Unlike the Dong's slow ascent, which signals its poor economic forecasts and Vietnam's sluggish economic performance, Dong's gradual appreciation reflects Vietnam's economic liberalization and high growth capabilities. It is therefore important that any potential investor understand the context of which these currencies operate. Thus, the dinar provides an opportunity to receive high risk and high results. The dong is more stable, but has less perspective for investment. Of course, as with any other transactions involving acquiring an asset, profound analysis and risk assessments are the key to achieving success.